Hello and welcome to Innovation 360's second webinar presentation in the Change Management series, where we discuss the 6 levers of an effective change strategy. As I mentioned, this is the second in the series of our change management webinars. So if you have not seen the first webinar presentation in our change management series, Battling with Resistance in an Organization, my suggestion to you would be to turn this one off and view that one first, as it does give you a good description of the stages that individuals go through in their individual change process, and it also talks about the types of resistance that you as a change agent will be facing and looking for ways to minimize as you begin your change strategy. We will be referring to a few things from the first webinar, which is why I suggest you review that one first and then come back to this. For those of you who have attended the first webinar, welcome back again. This particular webinar, we want to talk about certain forces that we have at our disposal that really support any kind of process or organizational policy or system that we have in place, whether it is the current or a new process, and how we might be able to utilize those forces and maximize those forces to help the transition, help the organization transition from an old stage to a new stage. We'll just review those 4 stages of the individual change process that we mentioned in the first webinar, just to give us a sense of what we were talking about at first. Hopefully that'll remind you of the conversation that we had before. And from that, we'll talk about the 6 change levers and how they can actually impact the change process. Remember the transformation period that exists between old and new. We'll mention that before. Let's talk about that transformation period. In our first webinar, we talked a little bit about the extended timeline of any organization, regardless of the organization, regardless of the culture of the organization or the intent of the organization. All companies, all organizations go through some changes that affects their customer base, affect the way in which they provide for and deliver a customer experience in their product and service offerings. And usually during the process by which we are delivering to a customer's customer requirements, our goals are mostly internally focused. We're driven to deliver better, faster, cheaper. So we look for ways to increase organizational effectiveness within our current paradigm. But throughout the extended timeline, there are periods where technology changes, or we bring in different type of equipment, or we bring different systems in, or we reformulate the way in which we deliver to the customer experience. All of those changes, regardless of the size, the scope, or the gravity of the change, will require or will cause some chaos within the organization itself. I'm referring to the space in between the S-curves that you see on the page right now. That space is that transformation period. And the things that we do between the S-curves really dictate the amount of gap that we have between the S-curves. How long does it take for the organization to truly embrace the new way of doing business and release themselves from the old way of doing business? Much like our conversation in our first webinar, we talked about how we can prepare people for change, and really the work that we do now prior to the actual change event occurring really goes far in making that transition a little bit more efficient and bringing more people into stages of commitment and exploration, getting them out of stages of denial and resistance. Speaking of those stages, we also talked about the individual changes that individuals go through as they are attempting to transition themselves from the old way of doing business to the new way. Just a quick review. We'll talk about the 4 stages. It usually starts off with the denial stage. leads into the stages of resistance, both active and passive resistance, and sometimes different types of resistance depending on the character of the employee or the age of the employee or the ability to deal with risk and of each employee. We may see different types of resistance, aptitude or attitude resistance, for instance, or maybe there's a saturation point that the individual leads to. Those types of resistance will always be there, and depending on what the organization does to help reduce that resistance will also speed up their each individual's movement into a more positive stages of change, which is the stages of exploration and commitment. Dealing with the loss of the old process happens, building up our skill sets and preparing ourselves to become leaders within the new paradigm. That's really what the goal is for getting people through this. Now, we can't eliminate or flatten this curve as change agents ourselves. When we deal with change within the organization or with anywhere with other individuals, our goal as change agents is really just to minimize the amount of time spent in the more negative, less productive stages of change, and getting each individual into stages of commitment where they can embrace the new change and they can begin to be rewarded and feel success from that new stage or from that new change. So we talked about that in our first webinar series. What we didn't talk about was really what happens in this as a holistic process. In all changes, we can expect individuals themselves to move through this process at different speeds. There isn't a cookie-cutter approach to change management. Individuals or groups of individuals that think alike and respond alike are going to move through this process at different speeds, and they also can regress backwards into less productive stages of their individual change process depending on what's happening within their own separate environments. An example would be if an individual gets punished for taking the risk and trying out in the new environment and within new rules and regulations. They may find themselves to be more reluctant to try it again. They may actually go from a state of exploration back into a state of resistance, where they may have found themselves to be having aptitude resistance. However, if they regress backwards, they're going to have attitude resistance, which means a different style of response for us as change agents. Now, organizations can also regress as well. And we think about organizations as an entity in and of itself. An organization has its own character. It has its own heartbeat. It has its own code of ethics and its own morals and its own value system. We hope that because the organization has its own values and morals and ethics, that the people who are successful within that organization also share the same morals and values and character. But the organization itself can also regress into its own stages of resistance and denial as well, which can also hamper its ability to adapt to the overall paradigm shift that's going on within the industry itself. So we can also be poised to acknowledge that as well. People can be influenced to move in either direction, though, which is a good thing. It means that we don't have to wait for people to make it through their stages and get into the stage of commitment. We, as change agents or as sponsors of change, can actually positively influence people into through the stages that they're going to be experiencing. In so saying, we can also negatively influence them into regressed stages of their individual change process. So we have to be cautious here as well. And the executive position on change really can be a barrier or can be an enabler to each employee within the organization. We'll talk about how important the sponsor is or the executive position is in the change event as we get into this webinar. So I mentioned before that there's actually 6 levers with 6 different forces out there, if you will, within the organization that must be addressed whenever any change happens in an organization. When I use the word change in an organization, I'm talking about a change to a system, or a redesign of a process, or a methodology that's being introduced, something that might enhance or change the culture of the organization. It could be something that's technical in nature. We're bringing in new machinery, or we're bringing in a new computer application that's going to cause us to have to address how we do business. Again, the notion here is the change agent who is sponsoring the change knows a little bit about the change, understands the technical requirements that would support the change, but may not necessarily know the softer elements to the change management process. So these 6 levers are just headings, if you will, of an action plan for managing change, managing the transition period that would take an organization from the old way to the new way. Let me introduce you to those 6 levers here. The first level is sponsorship. We'll talk about how an adequate and active and an engaged sponsor of the change event is crucial, and how the message that can be sent by that sponsor could enable or could actually hinder the progression of that transition period. We'll talk about the second level of communication, and how the tools that we use to communicate the change event, how they must be addressed and how they must be fully utilized and fully engaged to make sure that we are capturing all the pockets of the organization, and that we're really adapting ourselves to not just addressing one way of communication, which is the simplest form of communication. The most difficult, of course, is the one-on-one dialogue that we have with our employees. Much more difficult to deal with, but again, we'll have to do a unique design for each individual stakeholder or stakeholder group. Performance management is our third lever. We'll talk about how the tools and the mechanisms and the measurement systems that we currently use to monitor the things that we feel are important to the organization, the elements that are important to the organization, the way in which we do business, and how we are perceived by our customer base, or by our customers, by our industry as a whole. Those things are important, and they also must be addressed when we're considering changes or adaptations to a new paradigm, because they themselves must also be adapted to reflect what good looks like and how we're going to ensure people are doing the things that we want them to do. Our fourth lever we'll talk about is organizational structure, and how, as we change the methods by which we deliver customer satisfaction to our clients, how do we also must address the way in which we formally structure our organization to support all of the business processes, all of the product and service deliveries, all the value streams that provide all of that experience to our customer base. Our fifth lever is capability development, where we mentioned performance management as a way to monitor the behaviors that we expect in people. We may also have to pay some attention to the skill sets that our employees have. How can we ensure that the skill sets we want them to have that will make them successful in the new change be enhanced? And how can we make sure that they have the skills that they don't currently have before the change actually occurs? And our sixth lever is the workforce transition. How do we move the entire bubble, the entire entity of our organization? How do we transition them off the old platform onto the new platform? How do we move everybody there? How do we make sure we leave nobody behind? And how do we ensure holistically that the new process is going to be the process? It's going to be the only way to do business in the organization. So these are the 6 levers. Take a mental picture, if you will, of this slide, and understand that we're going to just talk at a very high level about each one of these 6 levers: sponsorship, communication, performance management, organizational structure, capability development, and workforce transition. All 6, in one degree or another, will be identified and activities will be accomplished by thoughtful change agents looking to minimize the amount of transition time that is taking up when the change event actually does occur. Our first level of sponsorships, or lever of sponsorship. So let's talk a little bit about sponsorship. When we say sponsor, I'm talking about one individual. I'm talking about the individual, the one person who, with the stroke of a pen, can make the change to the process, and who will be looked upon as the accountability person. Who is going to be responsible for, who is going to be held accountable for the successes in this particular change event. Now, whoever that individual is, could be we also call that a process owner as well. But the sponsor is the person who is going to be looked at for guidance, for acceptability. It helps people get through the stage of denial when they see that the sponsor is actively engaged in changing the organization to a new paradigm. So that sponsor must be able to express their belief in and be able to actively support the change and give it some kind of reasonable priority amongst all the other things that are going on in the organization. If the sponsor does not do this, we recognize and we see that behavior as a lack of priority in the change event itself. People will not be able to move out of denial, out of the denial stage, if they see that their sponsor doesn't support it. They're just not going to be able to do it because they will have evidence to support that it's not going to happen. So once the sponsor is able to actively commit themselves to the change and be able to start talking about it on a day-to-day basis and be able to get people to acknowledge that sooner or later there's going to be this change that's going to occur, and we know what day it's going to be, and you're going to have to be prepared for it, the quicker a person can actually get themselves out of the denial phase and into some relevant level of resistance that we would expect everybody to go through. We expect that sponsor to be able to allocate resources as well. It's not just about talking about change. It's about actually making sure that the resources are available to ensure that the project is going to be successful, to ensure that the change event actually occurs. So these resources are more than human resources. We're talking about individuals that are going to be delegated some responsibilities to actually accomplish tasks. We're talking about technical resources that are going to be made available to support those individuals and ensure that they are set up for success. But it's also the resource of time, to be able to give them the amount of time necessary to make the change actually occur. Sponsorship goes beyond just allocating resources. It also talks about sponsorship being able to remove barriers as well. Obstacles are going to crop up. Problems are going to occur. We would expect those sponsors to be able to remove those barriers and, if necessary, make the tough decisions and make the trade-offs and bargain to make sure that the change event can still happen. Those tough decisions are what leaders do, and so we expect our leadership to be able to make the tough calls when the tough calls are there. Almost as important as allocating resources and removing barriers, the sponsor must also be able to empower others to be able to act on behalf of the change event. But empowerment, again, doesn't mean abdication. It doesn't mean delegation. There are two separate elements here. Yes, the sponsor is going to be able to empower a project manager to manage the tasks associated with making the change happen. Yes, a sponsor can empower a Six Sigma black belt to collect data and run some analysis and make some decisions based on the data that they collect. Absolutely. But a sponsor can't delegate his own responsibilities. Sponsorship itself cannot be delegated. If it is, then we have to go back to that first bullet. If sponsorship is being delegated, does the person that everybody see as the sponsor truly believe in and support the change? The answer is going to be no, and denial is going to become a major force in this change event. Nobody is going to believe that the change is going to occur. So that's lever one. Lever two is about communication. It's about all the tactics that we use to get the word out, and also to get the word back. It's not just the one-way forms of communication. It's not just creating the awareness and sending out the flyers and updating the databases or updating the websites to give people an understanding that change is about ready to happen. It's also about getting the affective understanding of why the change is actually going to be occurring. We can give the hows and we can give the whats, but we also have to get the whys out there as well. We have to give people an understanding of the picture of why we are changing. So not only do we have to pay attention to the type of awareness and understanding and the dialogue that we're creating amongst all of our stakeholders, we have to really establish some new channels of communication. We have to look for the type of message that we are trying to send out and the types of channels that we're going to use to get the message out, but not just the messages that are going out. One-way communication is only half of the process here. The formal process of communication also includes receiving feedback. So the forums that we use to capture feedback, to get some of the concerns and the issues that are being thought of by our stakeholder groups are crucial for us in helping them get through their denial and their resistance that they're going to put forward to the new change event. These forums are essential for helping us as change agents and coming up with new strategies for helping people understand and come to terms with the change and the new paradigm. So what will those feedback mechanisms look like? And how will you go about capturing this information, bringing it back into your team, and then looking for strategies to communicate new methods for adapting to the new paradigm? We want to be proactive. We can't just wait for the change event to occur and then now suddenly discover some of the resistance that crops up. We know there will be resistance. We know that all individuals who are going to be affected by the change will have or experience some behaviors that are indicative to resistance in the actual change event. So let's be proactive in dealing with those behaviors by being proactive in developing the communication channels. We recognize this to be very important, so let's develop a task list, let's develop an action plan for addressing and allowing everybody to provide information, provide their concerns to us, because we know that resistance is going to exist. Also, please keep in mind that no matter what vehicles we use to communicate, we can never truly over-communicate any kind of changes that we're trying to make within the organization. So make sure that your plan also includes all the different formal types of communication and as many types of communication systems that you can include to get the message across and to provide feedback to you and the rest of your team so that you can address any kind of contingencies and any types of resistance that you will face in the transition period. Now, the third level lever of effective change management is performance management. And we mentioned this before, how important it is for organizations, generally speaking, to have systems in place to monitor their own performance against certain critical attributes that are key for successful businesses to remain successful. This is not going to be any different when a change event occurs. We have to have a method to link the actions and the behaviors of all of our employees to the strategies and the goals of our organization. This includes progression to a new platform or to a new paradigm. If the paradigm and the change is important to the business, if it meets the strategic goals and the intent of the business itself, then that change must also be monitored for progression. So we have to ensure that all of the things that we have in place that reward and that monitor all of the attributes of our employees, the actions and the behaviors of our employees, such that they align to the new change event. They must all be considered for adaptation. So let's use systems that actually define and monitor and measure and report on and improve and reward the employee performance that is best conducive to the new change, making sure that, that those are very well aligned for the new environment. And we also have to consider disassociating all of the behaviors that made the old process successful that aren't necessarily beneficial for the new process. And keep in mind, everything with regards to performance measurement can be summed up in this one quote, and that is, that which gets measured and that which gets rewarded gets done. We know this to be a fact because we are also responsive to those measurement systems that are important to the business. Measurement systems that monitor the key indicators of the business also create pain for us, and that pain forces us to act. So whatever we have in our full spectrum of measurement systems are those things that we find as important. So the change event itself, if it is important to the business, will also have a series of key measurement systems that will monitor the progression over time. We must make sure that our performance systems are also aligned well with the change event itself. The fourth in the 6 levers is organizational structure. In the summary, I mentioned that as we make changes to our organization, as we change the rules and regulations for getting work done, we may also have to adapt the organization to support the new system. And that includes the actual physical structure of the organization. Our chain of command may change, reporting responsibilities may change, physical proximity of work systems and work cells and value streams may change to support and enhance the new paradigm. So we have to address the organizational structure as we're addressing the new process. It really is a natural progression within all organizations to redesign processes so that we can cope with the challenges of growth and we can deal with major organizational change. It's a necessity to adapt every system. So we have to look for those things. And there really is no best practice out there for overall organizational design. What is truly best for an organization is really determined by that organization itself. Now, it doesn't mean we can't look for benchmarks. We can't look for systems that are either inside or outside our industry that have done it well. We can learn a lot from benchmarking, but it doesn't mean a cookie-cutter approach to change. We can't take one system and just lay it over another system and be successful. Your culture and your organization deals with change differently. The individuals within your organization deal with change based on the way they've dealt with change in the past and whatever's been rewarded in the past. So we have to pay crucial attention to what would be successful in our organization as we map out a new organizational structure and we reorganize the organization to make the new change successful. And keep in mind too that as strategies change, organizations change with it. So when we make and build out our 5-year, 10-year plans, that's what we perceive to be where our organization is going to go 5 years from now may not necessarily mean that's where it's going to end up in 5 years. New technology erupts, changes to our customer requirements happen, new technologies are introduced, and we can try to prepare ourselves to be more proactive when we know what's going to be out there. But again, we can never be truly accurate when we attempt to forecast the direction of our organizations. But in fact, change will happen, and so will the organizational structure itself. We can almost bet that the physical organization is going to change as a result of our adaptation to the evolution of our industries. The fifth in the 6 levers is capability development. Now, when we talked about communication and we talked about the importance of getting feedback and understanding the types of resistance that we are going to face as our change event starts to unveil itself. What also is going to unveil itself is the skill sets that is going to be required in order to make the new change a permanent change. The new paradigm, the new rules and regulations may require different skill sets, some that you have, some that you do not. So identify the skills that your workforce currently has that are really going to be necessary for the new change. If they already have them, that's great, because that means they can utilize them. Those skill sets can be made stronger, be made more effective, so that, again, they can acknowledge, those individuals can acknowledge that they have the tools needed to be successful in the new paradigm. But also acknowledging not just the skills that you have, but also the skills that you do not have within your workforce. And how are you going to obtain those skills? Do you have to go out and find a different employee out there that does have the skill set and bring them in? Or is this a skill set that you can develop in-house? Either way, both of them are examples of dealing with the gap in the skill set, but neither of them are optimal. You have to choose for yourself which is going to be the optimal path. Obviously, in order to keep employees that have been around for a long time, to keep them in the new paradigm, you have to be able to develop their skills and give them new skills so that they can be and feel like they are going to be successful in the new paradigm. So make a plan for yourself. Build out the capability matrix, the skills matrix for the new change event. Understanding what skills are going to be necessary, identify the gaps, and then look for strategies and build strategies for filling the gaps. Make sure that you can increase the employee's ability to be able to be successful in the new environment and to be able to let go of the old environment. The more that they can feel comfortable with the new environment because they know they have the skill sets, the less aptitude resistance you're going to feel. Our final lever today is the workforce transition itself. It's the holistic movement and evolution of the workforce and transitioning them off of the old platform, of the old paradigm that you'd like to move from to the new platform, the new paradigm that you are moving to. Again, a plan is required here. We have to develop an integrated plan to be able to move stakeholders from the current platform to the desired platform. Many different strategies here are available, but the one that seems to work the best is the one that generally says, let's create this idea that people must move from a state of comfort to a state of discomfort. And how do we move people from one platform to the other? Well, one is we have to give them the bridge. The bridge from the old platform to the new platform means that we have to look at our skills. We have to build the skills. We have to communicate the new change. We have to give them the tools and the understanding and the skills to be successful in the new platform. Once we do that, we have to destroy the old platform. Now, it doesn't mean we have to disavow the old platform, because the old platform was once good for us at a moment in time, but it's not going to drive success in the future. So we have to acknowledge, on the effective side, we have to acknowledge the success that the old platform gave us, but we don't have to keep it. In fact, we have to remove it. So we have to figure out ways to ensure that everybody understands that there's no going back. That once they make the commitment to take the bridge and get onto the new platform, that once everybody's on the new platform, the old platform is going to disappear. And we have to make it relevant, and we have to let them know that there's a time scale involved here. It can't be whenever they feel comfortable. That we're going to have to press them to move quickly to the new platform, which means we have to create some milestones. We can measure our progress over time. We can measure our success over time. We can identify through training records, for instance, how many people have taken a course that will give them the skills that they need to be successful, so that they can try out those new skills in the new platform before the old platform is removed. And then once we get everybody over, once we transition the workforce onto the new platform, let's create some mechanisms so that we can control and monitor the change over time. Again, in order for us to sustain gains, we have to make sure that the gains are relevant and that we are still progressing forward on those key indicators that we identified early on that are important, the whole reason why we've made the change from old to new. So let's create those control mechanisms and identify the things that we're going to be monitoring over time. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. 6 levers of change management. All 6 are interconnected. They're not mutually exclusive. They feed one another, and they all have to be addressed. All successful change agents identify with and understand that there are forces out there that they also have to deal with, not just the actual tangible activities that relate to the specific change, but the intangible activities of dealing with the individual change process. We mentioned the 4 stages of the individual change process and how people progress through the stages, and how we can't really eliminate the stages. All we can do is try to reduce and expedite their movement through the change process. Those activities that help reduce and minimize are reflected in the 6 change management levers that we discussed. We can talk further about this in many of our classes that we hold at the Innovation 360 Institute, and we would always welcome any kind of dialogue with regards to change management in general and the specific activities that one has to engage in as a change agent in an organization trying to affect innovation and change within their structure. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and look forward to seeing many of you again in our future webinars that we put on. Just keep our websites in your favorites list at www.i360institute.com, and we will see you once again. Thank you again for your time.